How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of On the Line. Today we're going to talk about burnout, or as William Lung will explain, correctional fatigue. That's the other term we use for burnout in corrections. This is going to be a very important topic, something that we must pay attention to. I mean, not just for us on a personal level, but also management. If you're watching this, you really got to understand how burnout or correctional fatigue can affect the safety and security of our prisons and jails. So first we'll go with Connie. Connie, you mind saying hi to our audience?
Hi, Connie Alleyne here. I'm the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy and the host of the Fly Behind the Wall podcast, as well as Conversations with Connie. I am so happy to be here today to talk about burnout because I have experienced it myself, and I hope that we can be helpful to the audience.
Now, guys, if you get a chance, me and Connie did have a dialogue on the Tier Talk YouTube channel, so don't forget, check it out. We're just going to give a brief summary of what we discussed because, again, the last discussion we had was about an hour and 15 minutes. But we're also going to bring in another perspective, my mental health expert when it comes to correctional professionals, William Young, who is well, you know what, Will? Introduce yourself, Will.
Well, thank you very much, Anthony. I'm William Young, correctional officer, author, and advocate for the correctional profession. I host a little podcast on Saturday nights called the Saturday Night Synopsis. And Anthony calling me an expert is like calling a crazy person sane. So, yeah, we'll see where this goes.
Listen, I don't have time to figure out what that means real quick, but I'm going to write that down. I know that means something, and Connie just laughs to laugh. So, hey, so I thought we could do real quick is just to get a quick understanding, because it is a real quick video, is maybe we could define what burnout is. So I thought we can go with Connie first, and then we'll go to William to kind of talk about that correctional fatigue. So, Connie, how would you define burnout?
So burnout describes the physical and emotional exhaustion that you feel over a period of time, where you're overwhelmed, you can't seem to find any job satisfaction, you become pretty much start feeling helpless, feeling unappreciated. Also, you develop this sense of cynicism, and really you become resentful over a period of time. You can't seem to rebound from it, and that's when you know that burnout is really set in.
Right. I know one of the things they also mentioned is your motivation to do the work. And I know that's something we definitely explored because I feel that when we went through it, we hit all three: the mental and physical exhaustion, the cynicism, like you said, just being, I like to say sarcastic, if you will. And then obviously, what do you call it? Not feeling effective, not being 100% motivated. Hey, Will, obviously, you very familiar with a term we use, correctional fatigue. What does that mean?
So correctional fatigue is kind of like an umbrella term. So it's like if I say soda or pop, that covers Pepsi, Coke, Mountain Dew, all the popular things. Correctional fatigue is just kind of the umbrella term for all of the things that affect us: the depression, the PTSD, burnouts under there, all of the effects, negative effects of working in this environment, this line of work. It just is kind of like a term that Katerina, the founder of Desert Waters Correctional Outreach, coined to explain and encompass all of those.
Now, the thing how this affects safety and security is when people are burned out or they start to feel overwhelmed, they sort of become negative. And I think that's where the cynicism comes in. And what happens here is in corrections, one thing we cannot do is be pushed away from people that are negative. I know it kind of goes against what we want to do, because when people are negative, the natural instinct is like, I don't want to be around this person who wants negativity in our lives. But unfortunately, in corrections, a person that may be going through burnout could be isolating themselves and really making the facility as a whole vulnerable. And it was a great point that Connie brought up in the end of the dialogue that I felt was definitely something we want to play here, where how burnout or correctional fatigue can cause other staff members to not want to be around you. And if that's the case, what happens here is if you're not connected to your peers, guess who's going to jump in and foster that connection? The inmate population. So, Connie, you mind exploring that when you talked about safety and security in relationship to burnout or correctional fatigue?
So I was just thinking more along the lines, the more you start feeling as though your light has been dimmed, as though you no longer have that fire, that drive, that motivation, the more you begin to isolate yourself and you become more vulnerable to other ways of either being manipulated or other ways that boundaries could be crossed.
Yeah, and I love that metaphor about that light being dimmed, because one of the issues that we discussed is, especially during these times, limited resources, and how the demand from above, with obviously knowing that management may have limited resources, wind up making people that, like your star employees who want to go above and beyond, they wind up getting disillusioned and just kind of pull themselves away from the profession. And we don't realize every time we tell them no, their light just starts to slowly turn off until eventually the light inside themselves is completely off. And I'm a big fan of that metaphor, because when you were saying it, I felt it, because it happens to all of us. I mean, we go there with that, energy, the star people. We want to do something, and eventually we get the no's. And what's funny is, as management, again, we'll talk a little bit about management. When you have that employee that always speaks their mind, and let's say you tell them a no and you expect them to say something, and in this case they don't, you should go back and wonder what changed. Because this person used to always say no, and now they're feeling maybe a level of defeat, if you will. And I think also defeat could lend itself to being burned out. What's your thoughts on that, Will?
No, you're exactly right. That's what they tell us with the inmate population, right? When it's too quiet, that means something bad is about to happen. And if you have a guy or a gal that no longer wants to put their feedback in or their input, it's like you said, it's because they feel like they're not heard, because it feels like what they do doesn't matter. And then that's we've all gone through that. We've all put in for a promotion we didn't get. We've all came up with a project that we wanted to do, and administration shut it down. So we've all kind of felt that way. But those people, knowing your people, and you should really reach out to them when they don't respond or they don't act like they normally did, because you have a chance to rescue those people at that point, to bring them back, to make them continue to be the good officer that they have been. But if you let that go, and you let them further isolate themselves and just feel like nobody cares, then they're just going to be a warm body for you.
Right. And unfortunately when you have that warm body, you're getting an employee right now that just is not motivated to do the job. And I learned something recently, actually, in a recent discussion, where, you could still give 100% effort and not care. And that's where me and Connie, during this dialogue, we came up with the conclusion that you're not focused on the outcome. You're just focused on going through the process, and really just whatever happens, happens. And we really don't want that mentality, because the outcome really does matter when it comes to working in corrections. Now, for me, and we'll just briefly go over what in my mind caused me to go through correctional fatigue, was the routine of the job, and then wondering, where's my value in the end? And I didn't really notice I was going through it until I was on that list to be promoted. And then I started seeing where my road is next. And that's where I started questioning everything I was doing as an officer, because I wanted to get that promotion. I was a year and a half away. And, again, the routine just, it's just day in, day out, the same thing. And the funny thing is, in the process also, I was gaining a lot of knowledge, and I didn't feel that in the position I was currently in, I was able to utilize that knowledge at 100%. So for me, the burnout came with the routine, but I got lucky. I was able to make a transition into a higher position. And again, that still, eventually the sergeant role became a bit of routine, but now I get a little bit of creative magic as a superintendent when it comes to facilitating the dynamics between the different departments. But my luck, I was able to transition out. Now, some of the people say that when it comes to burnout, it's going to be one of two things. It's either going to be the environment or you. For me, or it could be both, a mixture of both. But for me, it was me. But when I was able to transition out, I was able to find something new. And then again, it happened when I became a sergeant. So I, did it as the superintendent. And still, again, I have that love for the job. And I know for Connie, it was a little bit different. Connie had to deal with the demands of the job, but the limited resources, correct?
Correct. So I think it for me was the conflicting demands, which is really a big challenge when you're in that management space and you have demands from your central office, and you have demands from custody, and you have demands from your employees. And then on top of that, I think it was compounded by just a lack of control in a situation. You can control your actions, but you can't really control the expectations that the central office has. You can kind of control or at least shape the outcomes, but your reality is that you're placed in a situation where you really don't have 100% control of the outcome, and that in of itself burns you out.
Right, and that's what we mentioned about the control. And sometimes we don't realize that we're stuck within that, that confined space. You mentioned the ceiling, actually. And, you mentioned it. And you know what's funny? As you start to grow in this profession, you don't realize it, but the ceiling becomes lower and lower and lower. And then once you feel that you can't be creative, that's where you start to feel the stress, because you feel trapped and you start wondering what value you're giving. Hey, Will, have you ever felt burned out or with that correctional fatigue?
No, I don't know what you're talking about, Anthony. No, for me, it was because corrections is a never-ending job, right? We don't have we're not building anything. We're not making anything. We don't, have a finished product at the end of the day. And metaphorically, we do. But so when you go through the day-to-day grind, you don't really see the purpose of what you do. And then you have a few setbacks and things like you've been talking about. So for me, I had to really feel like, okay, what is my purpose? Why am I going through the things that I'm going through? Why am I even here? And then you need to, for some people, that's a promotion. For some people, that's starting in the training department. For me, it was, taking the course and writing my book and now doing the things that I'm doing. But finding that reason that you're in this situation and kind of taking ownership of your own path and making your way, man. That's how I get through this grind.
Yeah, it's a mixture of what we discussed. I agree. The level of control that you need, and that's one of the things that me and Connie discussed in the last episode. I think that level of control definitely moves you away from burnout. I think a lot of the times burnout happens because we may feel helpless and trapped. So, and I always, again, it happened in the last video. I don't want to say feel trapped. I think there's another term. I just forgot to ask what it is. But you're right. Without having that level of control, like for me, again, I got lucky. I was able to transition out. Now, if I wasn't able to transition out, I would have to find something within that position I'm in at that point to find value. And that's me. That's not up to the environment. That's me. And if the environment can't do that from my perspective, then maybe it's sad to say, but maybe this is not the environment for me. I mean, I used to think that with work, if I wanted to find happiness, I had to balance it. But there's also people saying that, you know what, Gangi, you should find happiness in the job that you do. You don't need to have another job to balance it. No, you need to find happiness in the job you do. So with that said, that comes on me. That's how I interpret what's set my way, and then how I deal with those concerns, how I process that. So again, just real quick, this is a quick video. We posted one up briefly on the Tier Talk YouTube channel. It's a bigger discussion. It goes a lot deeper, but I just wanted to get something out here because I thought it was a very important topic. Connie, you have anything you want to say in closing?
The last thing I want to say is that I know in our last video, we talked about, the safety and security side of things, but I just wanted to mention just the physical impact of compassion fatigue for the healthcare folks. I also wanted to mention sort of the impact of this inability to control our environment. I mean, we talk about burnout, but I think we also need to talk about the physical and mental illness that comes along with that: heart disease, hypertension. I would say just the physical exhaustion and the mental fatigue, depression, anxiety, and those are things that we really want to be tuned into.
Yeah, and that's not just for us on a personal, that's also for management. You want to have a healthy staff. Hey, Will, any closing thoughts?
Just that if you notice yourself getting burnt out, if you feel like some of these things that we're talking about make sense to you, reach out, go and check out some of these videos, talk to other officers, figure out what your new purpose is going to be, why you're doing what you're doing, and hold on to something and run with it, because we don't want to see good officers leave. And we all go through the things that you're going through. You just have to find your way, push through them, and it'll be better tomorrow. Well
said, guys. Now, even though this is a brief video, remember, it's meant to start the discussion. So the key here is sometimes you just need to have that flare. And that's kind of what we're doing here, that spark. Spark, flare. You know what I mean? Basically something to ignite. And then eventually the dialogue will just take on its own like we had the other day. But is it a flare? Would a flare cause a fire? I'm sure it could.
Sure, absolutely.
What the fuck? It is now. It's a flare. All right, guys. As always, the show is on the line. Thank you, Connie. Thank you, Will, for coming on. Make sure you guys check out their stuff. They have podcasts. They have a show live on Facebook. William does the weekend. What is it? The Saturday Night Synopsis. And then you got Connie, Fly Behind the Wall, right? Did I get it right?
Yes.
Conversations with Connie, and she is the founder of the Civilians Corrections Academy. And I won't crack any jokes, Connie, because it's Guardian RFID, but it's coming when we have the Tier Talk channel, so get ready. All right, guys, as always, stay safe, and see you next week.